far as the eye could reach no tree was seen, earth, clad in russet, scorned the lively green, no birds, except as birds of passage flew, no bee was heard to hum, no dove to coo, no streams, as amber smooth as amber clear, were seen to glide, or heard to warble here. Prophecy of famine. It was in the bracing atmosphere of a harvest morning that I met by appointment fair service, with the horses, at the door of Mr. Jarvie's house, which was but little space distant from Mrs. Flyter's hotel. The first matter which caught my attention was, that whatever were the deficiencies of the pony which Mr. Fairservice's legal adviser, Clerk Touthope, generously bestowed upon him in exchange for Thorncliffe's mare, he had contrived to part with it, and procure in its stead an animal with so curious and complete a lameness, that it seemed only to make use of 3 legs for the purpose of progression, while the 4th appeared as if meant to be flourished in the air by way of accompaniment. What do you mean by bringing such a creature as that here, sir? And where is the pony you rode to Glasgow upon, were my very natural and impatient inquiries. I selt it, sir. It was a slink beast, and wad hae eaten its head aff, standing at Lucky Flyter's at livery. And I hae bought this on your honour's account. It's a grand bargain, cost but upon sterling the foot, that's 4/8 edgether. The stringhalt will gie aff when it's gain a mile, it's a wilken ganger, they call it supple tam. On my soul, sir, said I, you will never rest till my supplejack and your shoulders become acquainted. If you do not go instantly and procure the other brute, you shall pay the penalty of your ingenuity. Andrew, notwithstanding my threats, continued to battle the point, as he said it would cost him a guinea of rhubargon to the man who had bought his pony, before he could get it back again. Like a true Englishman, though sensible I was duped by the rascal, I was about to pay his exaction rather than lose time, when forth sallied Mr. Jarvie, cloaked, mantled, hooded, and booted, as if for a Siberian winter, while 2 apprentices, under the immediate direction of Matty, led forth the decent ambling steed which had the honour on such occasions to support the person of the Glasgow magistrate. Ere he clomb to the saddle, an expression more descriptive of the bailie's mode of mounting than that of the knights-errant to whom Spenser applies it, he inquired the cause of the dispute betwixt my servant and me. Having learned the nature of honest Andrew's manoeuvre, he instantly cut short all debate, by pronouncing, that if Fairservice did not forthwith return the 3-legged palfrey, and produce the more useful quadruped which he had discarded, he would send him to prison, and immerse him in half his wages. Mr. Osbaldistone, said he, contracted for the service of both your horse and you twa brutes at ance, ye unconscionable rascal, but I see look will after you during this journey. It will be nonsense fining me, said Andrew, doubtily, that hasna a grey groat to pay a fine why it's ill taking the breeks aff a Highlandman. If ye hae nae purse to fine, ye hae flesh to pine, replied the bailie, and I will look weel to ye getting your deserts the tae way or the tither. To the commands of Mr. Jarvie, therefore, Andrew was compelled to submit, only muttering between his teeth, Ouramony maisters, as the paddock said to the harrow, when every tooth gie her a tig. Apparently he found no difficulty in getting rid of supple tam, and recovering possession of his former Bucephalus, for he accomplished the exchange without being many minutes absent, nor did I hear further of his having paid any smart money for breach of bargain. We now set forward, but had not reached the top of the street in which Mr. Jarvie dwelt, when a loud hallooing and breathless call of "Stop, stop," was heard behind us. We stopped accordingly, and were overtaken by Mr. Jarvie's 2 lads, who bore 2 parting tokens of Matty's care for her master. The first was conveyed in the form of a voluminous silk handkerchief, like the mainsail of one of his own Weston diamond, which Mrs. Matty particularly desired he would put about his neck, and which, thus entreated, he added to his other integuments. The second youngster brought only a verbal charge. I thought I saw the rogue disposed to laugh as he delivered it, on the part of the housekeeper, that her master would take care of the waters. Pooh! Pooh! Silly hussy, answered Mr. Jarvie, but added, turning to me, it shows a kind heart though, it shows a kind heart in sae young a queen, Matty's a carefew lass. So speaking, he pricked the sides of his palfrey, and we left the town without farther interruption. While we paced easily forward, by a road which conducted us northeastward from the town, I had an opportunity to estimate and admire the good qualities of my new friend. Although, like my father, he considered commercial transactions the most important objects of human life, he was not wedded to them so as to undervalue more general knowledge. On the contrary, with much oddity and vulgarity of manner, with a vanity which he made much more ridiculous by disguising it now and then under a thin veil of humility, and devoid as he was of all the advantages of a learned education, Mr. Jarvie's conversation showed tokens of a shrewd, observing, liberal, and, to the extent of its opportunities, a well-improved mind. He was a good local antiquary, and entertained me, as we passed along, with an account of remarkable events which had formerly taken place in the scenes through which we passed. And as he was well acquainted with the ancient history of his district, he saw with the perspective eye of an enlightened patriot the buds of many of those future advantages which have only blossomed and ripened within these few years. I remarked also, and with great pleasure, that although a keen Scotchman, and abundantly zealous for the honor of his country, he was disposed to think liberally of the sister kingdom. When Andrew Fairservice, whom, by the way, the Bailey could not abide, chose to impute the accident of one of the horses casting his shoe to the deteriorating influence of the Union, he incurred a severe rebuke from Mr. Jarvie. "Wisht, sir, wisht. It's ill-scraped tongues like yours, that make mischief atween neighbourhoods and nations. There's naething as say ye good on this side o' time but it might hae been better, and that may be said o' the Union. None were keener against it than the Glasgow folk, why their rabblings and their risings, and their mobs, as they see them nowadays. But it's an ill wind blaws naebody good, let ilka ane roost the ford as they find it, I say let Glasgow flourish. Wilkes judiciously and elegantly put 10 round the town's arms, by way of byword. Now, since Street Mungo catched herrings in the Clyde, what was ever like to gar us flourish like the sugar and tobacco trade? Will anybody tell me that, and grumble at the treaty that opened us a road west awa yonder?" Andrew Fairservice was far from acquiescing in these arguments of expedience, and even ventured to enter a grumbling protest that it was an unco change to hae Scotland's laws made in England, and that, for his share, he wadna for it the herring barrels in Glasgow, and at the tobacco casks to boot, hae gene up the writing o't the Scots Parliament, or sen awa our crown, and our sword, and our sceptre, and Mons Meg, * to be keepit by the English pot-puddings in the Tower o' Lunnon. * no G, Mons Meg. What wad Sir William Wallace, or auld Davy Lindsay, hae said to the Union, or them that made it? The road which we travelled, while diverting the way with these discussions, had become wild and open, as soon as we had left Glasgow a mile or two behind us, and was growing more dreary as we advanced. Huge continuous heaths spread before, behind, and around us, in hopeless barrenness, now level and interspersed with swamps, green with treacherous verdure, or sable with turf, or, as they call them in Scotland, peat bogs, and now swelling into huge heavy ascents, which wanted the dignity and form of hills, while they were still more toilsome to the passenger. There were neither trees nor bushes to relieve the eye from the russet livery of absolute sterility. The very heath was of that stinted imperfect kind which has little or no flower, and affords the coarsest and meanest covering, which, as far as my experience enables me to judge, Mother Earth is ever arrayed in. Living thing we saw none, except occasionally a few straggling sheep of a strange diversity of colors, as black, bluish, and orange. The sable hue predominated, however, in their faces and legs. The very birds seemed to shun these wastes, and no wonder, since they had an easy method of escaping from them. At least I only heard the monotonous and plaintive cries of the lapwing and curlew, which my companions denominated the peasweep and wop. At dinner, however, which we took about noon, at a most miserable alehouse, we had the good fortune to find that these tiresome screamers of the morass were not the only inhabitants of the moors. The goodwife told us that the goodman had been at the hill, and well for us that he had been so, for we enjoyed the produce of his chasse in the shape of some broiled moorgame, a dish which gallantly eked out the ewe-milk cheese, dried salmon, and oaten bread, being all besides that the house afforded. Some very indifferent two-penny ale, and a glass of excellent brandy, crowned our repast, and as our horses had, in the meantime, discussed their corn, we resumed our journey with renovated vigor. I had need of all the spirits a good dinner could give, to resist the dejection which crept insensibly on my mind, when I combined the strange uncertainty of my errand with the disconsolate aspect of the country through which it was leading me. Our road continued to be, if possible, more waste and wild than that we had traveled in the forenoon. The few miserable hovels that showed some marks of human habitation were now of still rarer occurrence, and at length, as we began to ascend an uninterrupted swell of moorland, they totally disappeared. The only exercise which my imagination received was, when some particular turn of the road gave us a partial view, to the left, of a large assemblage of dark blue mountains stretching to the north and northwest, which promised to include within their recesses a country as wild perhaps, but certainly differing greatly in point of interest, from that which we now traveled. The peaks of this screen of mountains were as wildly varied and distinguished, as the hills which we had seen on the right were tame and lumpish, and while I gazed on this alpine region, I felt a longing to explore its recesses, though accompanied with toil and danger, similar to that which a sailor feels when he wishes for the risks and animation of a battle or a gale, in exchange for the insupportable monotony of a protracted calm. I made various inquiries of my friend Mr. Jarvie respecting the names and positions of these remarkable mountains, but it was a subject on which he had no information, or did not choose to be communicative. "They're the Hieland Hills, ye'll see and hear enough about them before ye see Glasgow Cross again. I downa look at them, I never see them, but they gar me grew. It's no for fear, but just for grief, for the poor blighted half-starved creatures that inhabit them, but say nae mair about it, it's ill speaking o' Highlandmen as say near the line." I hae ken mony an honest man wadna hae ventured this length without he had made his last will and testament. Matty had ill will to see me set awa on this ride, and grad oi, the silly toppy, but it's nae mair furly to see a woman greet than to see a goose gang barefoot. I next attempted to lead the discourse on the character and history of the person whom we were going to visit, but on this topic Mr. Jarvie was totally inaccessible, owing perhaps in part to the attendance of Mr. Andrew Fairservice, who chose to keep so close in our rear that his ears could not fail to catch every word which was spoken, while his tongue assumed the freedom of mingling in our conversation as often as he saw an opportunity. For this he occasionally incurred Mr. Jarvie's reproof. "Keep back, sir, as best sets ye," said the Bailie, as Andrew pressed forward to catch the answer to some question I had asked about Campbell. "You wad fain ride the forehorse, and ye wist how that shields I for being out o' the cheesefat he was moulded in. Now, as for your questions, Mr. Osbaldistone, now that shields out of earshot, I'll just tell you it's free to you to speir, and it's free to me to answer, or none good I canna say muckle o' Rob, poor chield, ill I winna say o' him, for by that he's my cousin, we're coming near his ain country, and there may be ane o' his gillies ahint every windbush, for what I can, and if he'll be guided by my advice, the less ye speak about him, or where we are gone, or what we are gone to do, will be the mair likely to speed us in our errand. For it's like we may fa and wisome o' his unfreends, there are e'en ouramony o' them about, and his bonnet sits even on his brow yet for it that, but I doubt there'll be upsides why Rob at the last ere day or late day, the fox's hide finds I the flaying knife." "I will certainly," I replied, "be entirely guided by your experience." "Right, Mr. Osbaldistone, right. But I maun speak to this gabbling skite too, for bairns and fools speak at the cross what they hear at the ingleside. D'ye hear, you, Andrew, what's your name, Fairservice?" Andrew, who at the last rebuff had fallen a good way behind, did not choose to acknowledge the summons. "Andrew, ye scoundrel," repeated Mr. Jarvie, "here, sir, here." "Here is for the dog," said Andrew, coming up sulkily. "I'll gie you dog's wages, ye rascal, if ye dinna attend to what I say to ye. We are gone into the Hielands a bit." "I judged as muckle," said Andrew. "Haud your peace, ye knave, and hear what I have to say till ye. We are gone a bit into the Hielands." "Ye told me a say ye already," replied the incorrigible Andrew. "I'll break your head," said the Bailie, rising in wrath, "if ye dinna haud your tongue." "A hadden tongue," replied Andrew, "makes a slabbered mouth." It was now necessary I should interfere, which I did by commanding Andrew, with an authoritative tone, to be silent at his peril. "I am silent," said Andrew. I see do your lawful bidding without an essay. My poor mother used I to tell me.